Warning, this podcast has stories of real-life events and true crime that happens every day. These stories may contain adult language and graphic or disturbing details not suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
132 in Bush, I've got him at gunpoint. Check the left phone, we're going to pull that direction out this side. They're pulling them out.
911, advise ready for camp.
Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm Tom,
and I'm Chuck.
And it's been an interesting week. I voted today. Now, by the time you're hearing this, this comes out Monday. It's a week from. It comes out a week from today, I think, because we're catching up. Finally, we're getting things done in advance, and we've been kind of juggling things. Now, producer Dylan's got us on a pretty good schedule. So this will come out the following Monday. I voted last Monday. I did the early voting, so I'm done. I'm good.
You can vote out there that early, because here they're only like, hey, get your mail-in ballots.
October 15th.
Voting.
We could start voting October 15th. You have to go to the elections office.
Elections office?
Yeah.
Oh, not where is that at?
You don't go. Well, it's wherever you could look it up. Wherever your county election office is.
Interesting.
So we went to the county election office, and I just waited in line. And my wife's going to be gone on the day, or leaving for going to the airport, so we didn't want to have to hassle with that, so we just went and voted.
Honestly, because of all the FEMA stuff that I've been looking at, all the training that people have been getting from FEMA and DHS and stuff like that, they've been dealing with a lot of shootings or incidents that will involve shootings at polling places. Then they got these trainings months and months ago, so it's probably a good idea if you can get to your elections office, get there before everything, so that you don't have to
our local
happens at a polling location.
Our local school district canceled school on election day because there's 4 schools that are polling places, and they're like, you know what, we're not going to have school that day. We just don't want the drama.
Perfect.
I don't blame them. So for this week, Chuck, we have a very, I think, interesting guest. We are going all the way back. For those of you who've been listening to the show for a long time, and you go back in the Wayback Machine, we've had all kinds of veteran stories, and this one goes back to the first invasion of Iraq, I believe. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome Casey Weaver to the show. Hi, Casey.
Hello. How are you?
We're doing great. I mean, I voted. I'm good. Right?
I voted too. I'm in North Carolina.
The only one who hasn't voted.
So.
Yeah, you're a loser, Chuck. I voted.
Oh, I didn't know I could. See, I didn't see. You learn something new every single day, and if you're not, you're doing something wrong. So you absorb everything like a sponge. I'm learning something new every single day. At least I try to.
True.
But
yeah.
I learned something new. I can go.
Well, my son went with us, so it was his first, not his first election, his first presidential election.
What state are you in?
Idaho.
Okay.
And so, he got in the car, and I said, so, how'd you do? And he's like, oh, I voted this, and this. I said, oh, yeah, who'd you vote for president? And, of course, he's like, I voted for Trump, of course. I'm like, well, I didn't want to assume, dude. I didn't, my first election, I voted for Bill Clinton.
I did too.
Yeah.
Because I was young. It was 1992 when I was 18.
Yeah.
And I fell into that group of the young people who are easily swayed by the silky Obama kind of talk, and Bill Clinton just sounded good. And
I did. I voted my very first time. I voted for Bill Clinton.
Isn't that funny how you can have people from different areas, different generational gaps, but yet they all voted for that style of person for their very first election? What does that say about the minds of the youth?
And for me, I was 18. And so I was listening to the debates, and I thought, wow, he sounds silky smooth. And he sang a good story. And
yeah, for me, so Winston Churchill is attributed with this quote, and I don't have any reason to doubt it was Winston Churchill that said it, but it seems to be true. If you are not liberal in your youth, you have no heart. But if you are not conservative in your age, you have no brain. So I think
I'll buy that in a bag of chips.
Yeah. So,
but anyway, hey, all the listeners, vote for who you want to. We're not going to tell you who to vote for.
We're not telling you who to vote for.
We don't care. We care. We care.
honestly, we
We
care.
want-
But
Vote.
Vote right.
Get out
I
and
mean,
vote.
vote for who you want to.
Yes.
And don't be an idiot. I'll tell you. Okay, quick idiot story. My sister, there was something on the ballot that she didn't know enough about, and it was a stem cell research thing.
Wow.
And my wife has an autoimmune disease. Anybody who listens to the show long enough knows she has MS, and MS can, there's a lot of stem cell therapy that has been tied to helping treat and possibly cure
Yes.
MS.
Yes.
My sister voted no. And I said, "Why did you vote no?" And she said, "Well, because I didn't know enough about it." And I said,
Oh,
"Well,
no.
then that's when you abstain.
Right.
That's when you let the grown-ups do the talking."
Mm.
And this is a long time ago, but
Wow.
it's funny because I thought of that when I went to the office today, and they said, "You don't have to vote for everything. You don't have to cast a vote. You can
Mhm.
leave stuff blank." Right. And I inherently knew that, but my sister obviously didn't. And it was one of those things where, if I want people to understand, vote smartly. If you
Right.
are aware and you are have an understanding, vote. If you
Right.
do not know enough about it, don't just take a wild swing.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, Casey, welcome to the show. Now,
Thank you.
tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got in. Well, Chuck, you have a biography.
I do, yeah. We have super excited to have you on today. It's Casey
Thank you.
Weaver. She's an Army nurse in the Army Nurse Corps. She's retired. She was an Army brat growing up, lived in Germany, and then she enlisted in 93, commissioned in 97 as a second lieutenant. 98, she Triple Army Medical Center in Honolulu, Hawaii was where she was
Hardship
stationed
tour?
in 2000.
Not
Huh?
a bad gig, huh?
It was a hardship tour.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay. In 2000, she was the OIC Urgent Care Clinics, Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. 2002, I hope I said that right. 2002, she was a charge nurse, Womack Army Medical Center in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. February 2003, she deployed. And that's where we're going to get into her story. So I'm not going to get into anymore, but she did retire. And in 2019, spinal cord injury, level 7 cervical reconstruction,
Ooh.
7 months convalescent leave, PCS'd back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina to medically retire.
Oh,
Which
Yes.
is, I know all about back injuries, and that's a rough
yeah,
one.
we both.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I retired, medically retired from the police department, and Chuck's in the middle of medically retiring from the police department. It is not an easy job.
It is not.
Being on the front lines of
injuries suck.
anything is a young man's game and a young woman's game. So,
It is.
well, so why don't you tell us? Let's start with how you go from voting for Clinton in '92.
So I was kind of a very mediocre kid growing up. I had undiagnosed ADHD, so I was compliant and quiet, but barely passed kindergarten through 12th. I mean, I just barely got by. And I remember my 11th grade teacher calling my parents in when I was in the 11th grade, and she said, "Your daughter is a loser and an underachiever, and she will never amount to anything."
Wow.
Oh, my
And
gosh.
so I don't remember. I'm sure that my parents dialogued with her after that, but that was the end of what I remember of that. So I spent a year running around Germany, around Europe after my dad left, just doing nothing. And then realized I really have no future. I think being poor really sucks.
Yeah.
I did not set myself up for college.
Mhm.
Right.
I really don't have a path forward. I grew up just seeing my dad with light rays coming out of the back of him, like on a pedestal. I just thought my dad was the world. He was a Special Forces Green Beret,
Wow.
combat diver,
Wow.
and a helicopter pilot. And he was shot down 4
Wow.
times in Iraq and came home with injuries. And I always thought I would never join the military. I respected the military.
Sure.
Every man I knew was in the military because I
Right,
grew up in Germany. So everybody's dad was in the army. Everybody wore the same thing. But I thought, well, I couldn't join because I'm not brave. I guess brave people join the military. But after this year of kind of realizing that my life was really going to go absolutely nowhere unless I salvaged it, I enlisted to get the GI Bill so I could try to make something of myself. And my favorite show growing up was Rescue 911. I just thought it was the coolest. Like the first responders, the adrenaline of it all, like being at the scene, you know, the excitement. Absolutely. So I thought, well, I could be a combat medic. I mean, I'm not brave, so I'm not going to be a soldier, but I really respect soldiers and I would like to take care of them. I would like to give them the best care. So I enlisted, I went off to basic training and I graduated out of a class of 200. I was the last all-female class, basic training. Wow. But I graduated number 1 in my class at basic training. And it was really the first thing I'd ever done well or right in my life. And my dad came up and shook my hand and he said, I guess this Army thing runs in the family. And it was intoxicating, just doing something well. And I thought, I like this. And my dad, I respect him more than anybody. And if I've done something to really earn his respect, then, this is awesome. So I went on to college to get a 4.0. I graduated as the honor grad of my medic training. I was like, never again will I ever be second place in anything. So then graduated from nursing school, enlisted, commissioned, and I was stationed in Hawaii when 9/11 happened. So it was 3 a.m. and a friend of mine called me and woke me up and said, hey, turn on the TV. Something really bad's going on. And so I was off that day and I just watched towers fall and I thought, wow, I guess we're going to war.
Right. You know, and we've had multiple people of this generation, our generation, that we're in the military or police, like
that was our war now.
Saw that and it was like, there you go.
There we go.
That's what it sparked their entire career.
Right. And I hate to say this because it sounds warmongering, but you know, you wear your unit patch on one side and you wear your combat patch on your right sleeve. And when I commissioned in 98 or 97, it was the rarest of occasions that you would see somebody with a right sleeve patch. And that was either Grenada or maybe Somalia. Or major throwback to Vietnam, but that was very rare. And so, you know, I think you play the game, you want to go to the Super Bowl. And again, it sounds 100%. Warmongering, but at the same time, you think this is why I'm here. And that's what I signed up for. And so that was our warning order. Like you're going.
I always think of the scene in Braveheart when he refuses to surrender to the Brits and the Hamish looks at the rest of the men and goes, well, looks like we didn't get dressed up for nothing. And that's like, you know, we've talked to so many veterans that served, specifically Matt, one of our co-hosts, he served in Clinton's Navy and he never went anywhere. Right. Wow. He was very sad and to this day, you know, we talk to veterans who feel like second class veterans is what we call it because they didn't deploy. They didn't go to war. So young men and women don't get into this business to not want to go be the tip of the spear.
Exactly.
You don't join the football team to sit there to be the water boy or to be third string. You want to you join because you want to be first and you want to be out there and you want to be out there hammering it and doing what you practice every single day.
Yep. And trauma was my passion. And so where do you see trauma? What are we training for the whole time? What does a combat medic do? You know, somebody gets injured and somebody yells doc and they expect somebody to come running in and save the day. And that's who I wanted to be. And again, here I thought, well, I'm not brave, but I can be medical. And so that ties into my first story, which is that I was stationed at Fort Bragg. I had just gone to JRTC, long field exercise with the 28th Combat Support Hospital. And a combat support hospital is kind of lame. I mean, they do amazing things, but they are stationed way to the rear of where the action is because it takes them 3 full days to set up. It's a huge organization. They have a lot. So they don't want to be in harm's way. So there's me getting ready. I'm at Green Ramp at Fort Bragg, getting to deploy with the 274th Airborne. So there was a little segue from me being in the 28th Cache and thinking, oh, this is going to Miyazaki deployment to remember Afghanistan had started in November of 2001, and it had been going on already. And we kind of all had the sense that Iraq was going to kick off. But the 274th Forward Surgical Team out of Fort Bragg is the elite of the elite forward surgical teams. And it's an airborne unit. And therefore, I was not qualified because I was not airborne. They had just been to Afghanistan for 9 months. They worked with the special ops units. They were highly decorated. They were amazing. They had just rotated back. They'd been back for maybe 5 or 6 months. And then they got orders to go to Iraq to start that initial invasion, because the same special ops units that were already rotating back to go in for Iraq said, we know 274 and we want them. And they had one female on their team, and she had just gotten pregnant. Which was no detriment to her whatsoever.
Wow.
I mean, she had just come back from a deployment. Who would have thought they were going to turn around and go right out the door again? But they did.
That's a quick
And
turnaround
so
time for
it
anyone.
is a
That's
very quick
actually,
Very
they probably
quick
had
time.
to sign waivers because you have to have at least 6 to 7 months in the rear.
Dwell time. Right.
Yeah.
So the leadership of 274 came over to Womack emergency department. And so we would be their breeding ground for where they would find a trauma life support nurse. And they went to our leadership and said, we want your absolute best Army nurse. She doesn't have to be airborne. We don't care. He, she, whatever. We want someone who's badass in medicine, because we're not jumping in anywhere. But we are known for being the best of the best, and we want the best. And they coughed up my name, and that was the honor of my life. So that's why I was standing there at Green Ramp with a maroon beret on, which everybody hates because they're like, you're a dirty, nasty leg. You shouldn't get to wear that maroon beret, but anyway.
Is that because you didn't have the airborne training?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So
you're like, hey, sucks to suck. I got it. You didn't. You're jealous.
I know. And, it's funny. The guys on my team said, airborne school's not a prerequisite for jumping out of an airplane, right? And I said, what? Really? And they're like, oh, wait, we could put pack on your back. We'll just push you out. All you have to do is land. I mean, you just fall. You just fall and land.
It's there's not a whole lot to it, but to do it, right?
Okay.
It's a controlled fall. That's all it is.
Yep.
They put a static line and say, go.
There you go. Right there. Right. So this was the first of my just absolute golden eggs that I got in my career, where I got to slide in to a place of awesomeness. So we went off to Kuwait. We sat there. The 3rd Infantry Division had been sitting in Kuwait for a long time, 6 or 8 months already, and just waiting for this war to start. And so we got there, and we knew that the time was coming near. And we advocated like crazy to be in the front push. So, in trauma, kind of in medicine, they say that there's a golden hour of trauma,
Right.
You need to get to somebody within that first hour. But really in combat, it's about the platinum 10 minutes, because a bilateral amputee will bleed out and die in the space of 10 minutes. And that's a life-saving injury. It's a salvageable injury, survivable injury, I guess I should say. And that's where the forward surgical team was born. What's that?
In some cases, it is salvage. So,
Yes. So the time of old, there was the MASH, the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, and that's kind of the intermediary unit that would have been a kind of a damage control kind of capability.
Right.
But they got rid of the MASHs and they converted to the Combat Support Hospital, which was a huge, massive elephant, and it sits in the back. So that's why they had to spawn the forward surgical team to deal with that 10-minute survivability injury. And so a forward surgical team is 20 personnel, 6 Humvees. We're 4 surgeons, a trauma nurse, OR nurse, ICU nurse, 9 enlisted personnel, and 6 trailers and a generator.
And you were the 274th Forward Surgical Team?
274th Forward Surgical Team. Again, it's still the most highly decorated unit.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Um,
was just looking it up.
yeah,
That's amazing that you got to serve with them. That's crazy. That's so awesome.
it really is. It's
Yeah.
exceptional.
That's a cool
Um,
patch too.
That's
oh,
that's bad. That's
That's
bad.
cool.
That's a bad patch.
so interestingly, you know, the Marine Corps is men's department of the Navy.
All right.
The AMED is like the Disney department of the Army. Nobody wants to wear a medical patch. That's just like, I'm a loser. I didn't do anything cool.
Oof.
But on a
Not the
forward
corpsmen.
surgical
Those dudes are
team,
bad.
we are embedded with the infantry maneuver brigades who are in contact. So that is
You're
our
a
role,
certified
is to
badass.
do battlefield resuscitative care. We are supposed to pull a soldier off of the battlefield and do surgery on the side of the road, tie up their loose vessels, stop any bleeding, and get them on a medevac back to the combat support hospital. So again, we do damage control
Yeah,
surgery.
that's even forward of a MASH unit.
Oh, 100%. So MASHs don't exist anymore.
Right.
They
All right. I
phased
just
out the
meant,
MASH.
like, in the concept of people thinking of a hospital that's close enough to hear bombs and gunfire.
Yes.
Right. This is you guys are. They took away the idea of MASH and just said, you know what, go be out front with them.
Right.
Because
so
you can
we
do more
want
there.
We want a more definitive unit. It's a little bit to the rear, but we want the unit that'll save the lives that could have been saved on the battlefield. We want those. And one of the biggest changes from Vietnam moving forward into OIF was that we had such spectacular body armor, IBA, the ballistic helmet. So we did not have people dying of penetrating injuries to the box. We call this the box of life, from the neck to the pelvis and inside the arms. That's the box. So we didn't have injuries to the box, and we didn't typically have headshots. So we had a lot of extremity wounds, and these are wounds that can bleed out very quickly, but they can also be saved on the battlefield. So ultimately, this is why we were embedded with the 3rd Infantry Division in Kuwait, and we knew that we were going to cross the berm with them the day that they rolled. And so we kind of moved a little further north of Camp Virginia. We sat right on the berm, and Iraq and Kuwait kind of from both sides pushed this big thing of sand together that we call the berm between them after Desert Storm ended. And so the engineers were punching like 9 holes in the berm, and we had the Marines, like the 3rd MEF, the 1st MEF, the Brits, the Canadians. We had 9 fingers set up that were going to punch through the berm at the moment that the ground war started.
Ooh, yeah.
And so we're in a tent kind of up close to the berm, and our commander woke us up in the middle of the night and said, George Bush is speaking. And that was the giving 48 hours to Saddam and his 2 sons to get out of Iraq, or we were going to invade the country.
Right.
And so then we knew that was our real warning order. So we got into our ground assault convoy, and we had kind of a timeline in mind of when we were going to go. But shit started getting real fast.
I bet.
Yeah. So again, here's me. I'm not brave. I care about brave people, and they're patriots, and I want to take care of them. And all of a sudden, it was like the 4th of July. I just look up, and it's just nothing but countless tomahawks and missiles flying over our heads and lighting up the sky, the earth shaking. And I was like, holy fucking shit, shock and awe. And so this is where they were prepping the battlefield for the ground unit to go in.
Right.
And I guess I hadn't really thought about that, but it got really real fast.
Right.
And then they said, all right, everybody put on your J list, which is with the newer version of the MOP gear, combat chemical weapons gear, because Saddam was always talking, and he's like, Americans will swim in their own blood, and you will be, he's going to drop all these chemicals on us.
And he had used chems and
he
stuff
did.
before,
he
so
did. He had used recently. Yeah. Recently, he had bombed the Kurds up north of Mosul.
Yeah.
And so we knew that he had them, and he hated us. We also knew that the whole southern part of Iraq was littered with mines still from the first Gulf War. So at the beginning of each of the 9 lanes, we had minesweepers right up front, and they said, "Do not get out of the tracks of the minesweeper." And
Yeah.
most of the convoy that crossed over were tanks, because again, we went with the 3rd Infantry. So I sent a picture of a whole bunch of medical tanks kind of lined up there,
Mm-hmm.
and we got in
Yeah.
right behind them.
See if I can.
But
Did you guys? And you're saying like minesweepers and things like that, and that's generally what the combat engineers use and throw stakes in the
Mhm.
ground. They look like a tank, but they got a
Mhm.
sweeper on the front. And they
right,
dredge up the mines and blow them up.
and they're
in
supposed to
front and
detonate
just keep
them,
going.
right?
Right. Did you guys ever get to deal with amphibious assault vehicles with the Mikliks on the back where they would shoot the rockets and the C4 and stuff like that?
No, I
know you guys
I
are
don't
Army,
even
but-
know if they were using Mikliks at that time. I mean, I heard of Mikliks
Oh,
a
they
lot
were.
in Afghanistan. But okay, so then I
The
guess they
Mikliks on the back of the Humvees they were using over there, because
Oh.
that was my unit. We were
Oh,
we were
okay.
the tracks with the Mikliks, and
which unit were you with?
second tracks out of Camp
Okay.
Lejeune, North Carolina. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
a bunch of my guys were all there in the first invasion. They were all my NCOs when I came
Uh-huh.
in. But I was just curious, like those things were so like I would see in training, because obviously I was in high school at the time that
Oh,
the
so you're
towers were
younger than
hit.
I am.
Yeah, Chuck's
Yeah.
a little bit younger than us.
I'm
Mhm.
quite younger. I'm 30, about to be 36. So
Oh my goodness, your baby.
quite younger. But I would say younger than Tom and older than you, because you look not a day over 30. I'm telling you.
So yeah, I was only in the
Uh,
Army for 27 years. So
Yeah,
I
right.
joined when I was 3.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
I'm just saying.
I own my age. I've got a grandchild. I'm good. I'm the elder statesman of the show.
Excellent.
Good old grandpa over
Um,
there. But no, I just curious because those things were pretty awesome getting to see him operate in the minefields in Iraq and things
Uh-huh.
like that, and watching those videos. So I was like, dang, if you guys got to see that, that shit would have been
That would have
amazing,
been cool.
because they were using to bulldoze houses. Just take that track and just drive it right in.
That's
and then we're gonna
awesome.
enter.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
You're
One of the
on this-
coolest things I saw was during my second deployment, which I won't want to talk about, but the CRAM.
Oh yeah.
Those are amazing. And it always follows the big voice. So you're doing whatever you're doing, and then you hear a big voice that's like, "Get to shelter." And you start running for the closest bunker, and then you hear the CRAM go off, which just sounds like a saw. I mean,
Yeah.
it can fire what 3,000 bullets a second. It's
Something like-
exceptional. I mean, you could just watch it. It's like a laser show in the sky. You could just watch it going back and forth like a
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the
like-
world's most deadly light show you've ever seen.
Kind of like the
20 million
Iron Dome in Israel.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
is.
for people who
Yeah.
need a visual. Yeah, yeah.
Yep. It's our land phalanx, the Iron Dome.
Right.
I think Germany call it the Mantis.
Uh-huh.
They have different names for you.
Right.
20
So
millimeter. Oof.
we crossed the berm, and we actually crossed a little bit early because they said a helicopter went down in our lane, and we knew that there were 9 lanes, and they said,
Mhm.
which team has the embedded FST? That was us. So we took off, and fortunately, another helo had come down and rescued those pilots before we got there, but that meant our journey had started. So we did not go over any hardball roads at all for the first, I think, 3 or 4 days. So we were just trucking through the desert, through the sand. And I've got a picture in there that just shows how Humvees are not really built to go through the sand. And,
Yeah, this is, I mean, anybody
The
who's
best
Yes.
scene. Oh
So
yeah.
that's us.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
using our
There you
e-tools to dig ourselves out of that, that was not pleasant.
no,
Little
that's,
camping
that's,
shovels.
that's some work right there.
Yeah, it was.
Crazy. That's crazy. And
Mhm.
the best scene I could think of to describe what we're looking at right here would be
Mhm.
that scene in the invasion in Generation Kill when they're just trudging across the desert and just convoys just boom, just
Mhm.
blasting it. That'd
Right.
be exactly what
Right.
you're talking about.
And again, remember, most of the lane that we were with was the 3rd Infantry in their tracks.
Mhm.
So they're just rolling through on armor, and they're like, "Hey, where are you guys? Catch up!
Yeah, they got battle tires.
Can you pull us
We're
out?
stuck.
Come back and help a brother out."
We don't have tracks.
Right. So, again, I was the only female in thousands of people because the 3rd Infantry was, all men back then.
It was
And
infantry.
they didn't bring any of their support units with them, so it was just the
Mhm.
infantry rolling forward with the FST, and then I was the only female there,
How
and
was
so that
that?
really, it was good. So when I was a known entity to my team, when I came in,
Mhm.
I came in with 2 weeks warno that we were going to deploy, and they were not happy about it. They loved my predecessor, Paula Lastoria. She was amazing. So it's not like they did not like women in the military, but a woman in the military is an unknown entity.
Sure.
Is she going to come in and be fragile and a snowflake and think
Mhm.
everything is harassment, or is she going to make you blush with her mouth? And that was me. So,
Atta girl.
um, so interestingly, I think on probably our second stop, one of the guys on our team used to call me Bluff because I talk about things, and he's like, "Oh, you're bluffing, you're bluffing, you're bluffing." And of course, I was a downrange smoker, just like everybody else. And so I'm smoking, and he said, I think this guy had pulled out a dip, and I said, "Hey, can I have some of that?" And he's like, "You're gonna
Oh.
dip?" Like, "Oh yeah, right." And I was like, "Yeah." And so he gives it to me. I pack my lip, and he says, "Yeah, you're not going to hold that
Wow.
for longer than 15 minutes." And we're just out there filling sandbags because we
Right.
just moved to a new location, and we're trying to,
Mhm.
pull our tents down. And so he comes up, and he's like, "Hey, Bluff." And I turn around and I blow some smoke in his face. And he's like, "I knew you weren't going to be able to hold that." And then I spit. And he was like, "Oh, shit." And I said,
Oh.
"What are you going to call me now?" And he said, "Sir."
Nice.
So I pretty rapidly made
That's awesome.
myself.
It's
One of the
I
guys.
let them know, like, I'm a dude. I mean, the sooner that you guys can consider me a dude, the better off we'll all be, because I'm not. You can't offend me, and I'll probably offend you.
But I've seen these
Right.
pictures. I see you here. You're
Mm-hmm.
clearly a feminine woman, right? Right. But I'll tell you, one of the things that is very refreshing about the police department,
Mhm.
military, like anything where there is a put up or shut up mentality, right?
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
The second you put up,
Yep.
we will shut up,
Yeah.
right? Like it is a
Yeah.
meritocracy at its finest. If you're a weak
Absolutely.
sister, if you're a soothsayer,
100%.
penis or vagina doesn't make a difference. You're a
100%.
soothsayer.
And I will lead the charge louder than most people I know, that the meritocracy better never end. And when they
Right.
were talking about letting women into the infantry and letting women into special ops, I said, as long as you do not lower one fucking standard,
Right.
then I'll be okay with that. But the minute you start lowering standards, then it makes women look bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Anytime you
So-
change the standards to allow somebody in, you thus imply that the standards had to be lower for them to get in.
Mhm.
Which,
Yep.
Right.
sorry,
Yeah.
I mean, I thought the whole point of the U.S. military was to go make the other person die for their country. I didn't think it
Exactly.
was to,
Yep.
make people feel good and
Right.
touch.
Mhm.
Right.
Hearts and minds. Yes, 2 in the heart, 1 in the mind.
Mhm.
That's
Right.
what the military's job is.
My commander had to pull me off of a local imam a number of times when I got up in faces and started talking about, like, you don't respect your women. And they're like, Weaver, come here, come over here.
Oh shit.
Um,
I'm not here for that.
I was like,
There we go.
don't let me out in front of one of those people, because
Right.
it's not going to end well. But anyway, so we get through these minefields. It took us about 3 days to get to Anazaria. And on the battle plans, we did not expect to come into much resistance at all south of Anazaria. We thought we would come into our very first resistance at Anazaria, which was about a third of the way up the country. And then Baghdad's kind of halfway up the country. And then you've got Talil above that, which is the birthplace of Saddam. So he had that well guarded. But we knew that he had some units down in Anazaria because there was an air base there. So Talil Air Base. Yeah. So we went in by all sand roads, 3 days. We were so tired. I was the TC, the tactical commander of my vehicle. So
Right.
Actually, one story that I missed kind of going into that's Talil Air Base.
Mhm.
As we took it over, and you can't quite see here, but this was also the first day of that big orange out storm. That's still,
Wow.
it's biblical. This,
Yeah, I was gonna
this
say it
orange
looks
out
pretty
storm.
orangey. It looks hazy.
Right. But so we had moved into Nazaria, and we didn't really expect to see much action there. The plan was to take Tallil Air Base, and the Marines, the 3rd Marines, came up to our east, and they got bogged down in the middle of it. Somebody took a wrong turn. They ended up in a sewage ditch. They were in the fight for their lives, and they lost 18 Marines that day and had a lot of casualties.
Wow.
It was, I mean, we went in with a lot of arrogance. We did not expect to lose any Americans short of Baghdad. And, you know, this is
admittedly,
coming
the first
in,
one had been,
the thumbs ups and the smiles. What's
yeah,
that?
the first time our American troops went into the Gulf in the 90s in Desert Storm, it was that, right? It was
Right.
it was a bit of a cakewalk.
Yep.
So it makes sense that you were not expecting
Right.
the amount of and level of resistance you had.
Right, exactly. And they,
Right.
in the first Gulf War, everybody in Tallil and Nazaria just laid down their arms, just gave up.
I also think that's a kind of a testament to our United States military in the U.S. Is that we train our guys so well and our women so well that it's almost like it's like invincibility, where we're trained so well that we're not thinking about dying.
Yep.
We're only thinking about crushing the enemy.
Exactly.
We know that dying is a byproduct of that, and it can
Right.
happen, but we're not expecting it to happen to us or to our
Right.
unit or on that
Right.
scale. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because our mind's not there.
It's not.
It's on attacking the enemy.
Right.
Right.
But backing up just a little bit to that time,
Yeah.
as we were leaving Kuwait, when suddenly I look up and I see all these Tomahawks and the ground starts shaking and shit's just gotten real and this war has just started and there's no turning back and I'm at the front and what the fuck? You know, a Humvee is pretty wide. And so I had just a driver, Sergeant Reed. And I was a captain at the time. I was the officer in charge of advanced trauma life support. So Reed is this massive big black guy. I mean, he is massive. His brother was an NFL player.
Wow.
And yeah, he's just a big dude. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, are you a believer?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "Will you pray with me?" And I said, "I will." And so I mean, just this wide abyss of the Humvee, you know, I'm leaning over, we're both leaning over, I'm holding his hand and we're praying for this invasion. And after the prayer was over, I said, "Please don't let me be taken. I do not want to be a prisoner of war. I know what they do to women. I don't want to be beheaded on Al Jazeera in front of my family. I don't want any of that. If you see me getting taken, will you shoot me?" And he said, "I will." And he said, "Will you promise the same for me?" And I said, "I will." So that was our mindset going in.
Wow.
And
Was that
now
a sobering moment? Was that the first time you'd had that conversation?
it was. And it was the first time that I'd had to sit and think, like, how am I willing to live? Could I live as an amputee? Yes. I would want to be rescued if like my limbs were blown off.
Right.
You know, you just start going down the line of like, what could I live
Right.
with
What
in
is
my life?
acceptable?
Right.
What's
Yeah, and-
acceptable?
Yeah. And I did not want to be raped and tortured and beheaded slowly on Al Jazeera. And so I said I would rather die. And he did too. And that was our pact. And we both felt confident about that. And I know we both would have lived up to that.
Well, because they had just taken, I think at that time, I think when we talked, they had just snagged Jessica Lynch, right?
So this all happened, this prayer happened as we're all still in Kuwait, just about to cross into enemy territory.
Right before, okay.
So we cross over, we spend 3 days driving. I'm the TC, so I'm supposed to be monitoring like 5 meters distance from the vehicle in front of us, 5 from the one in behind. We're in blackout drive, tactical combat movement. And it's just like so many days have gone by. I'm looking at this chem light and I said, "Reedy, I can't even tell if it's moving or not." And can you tell? I mean, we were so exhausted.
Right. Yeah.
And then somebody came over the radio and said, "Hey guys, watch out for these third ID guys. There's some guys next to their tracks sleeping." I don't want to run over anybody. And we said, what the fuck are we doing passing the third ID? Like, we should be behind them. We should not be the front line of troops. So we kind of fallen behind them. But in any event, we get to Anazaria, and it was the first carnage I'd ever seen in my life. And so to talk about this burn donkey, it was nothing but blackened charcoal human beings for miles and miles in streets. Like a rain of death had just come down on them, and people were stopped right where they were, just crispy.
Yep.
And it was, never seen anything like that.
And these were nationals of the country.
So these are Iraqis. Yeah.
Right.
And again, they weren't super organized at that point. Not a lot of them were in uniform, although we did capture about 600 that we had in a triple ring concertina wire POW camp as we got into Anazaria. But again, Anazaria, if you think about like Fort Bragg, Fayetteville is the major town that Fort Bragg is in. So Anazaria is the major town that Tallil Air Base was in. And so our objective was to take Tallil Air Base. And apparently when the Marines took fire and had a really horrible engagement, they stopped third ID from rolling forward. And so we stopped there and just did some surgeries on some locals, but then got a call that there were a bunch of injured Marines coming in. And we were like, well, we need to get the fuck to Tallil, because that's what the battle plan said. The first med is going to be at Tallil, because we're just going to roll right in. We're going to roll right in and take it. And so that FST is going to be right there. And so a helicopter with a number of these Marines who'd been injured in Nazaria were flying into Tallil Air Base. And so that was that building that you saw us have the red cross over. Third ID came through, and they were just spray painting rooms with a circle and an orange cross in it saying, okay, you can go into this room. We've cleared this room. And there would just be insurgents there zip tied in the corner. But there's a picture of a helicopter landing in the middle of the desert and us pulling a litter off of it and taking care of the first Marines who were injured, who are our patients. So that day became, I think, probably the second day of there were a bunch of Marines there. So they were taking them over to that building that had the cross on it. So we were furiously unloading vehicles into these buildings, and we're getting shot at, and we're getting mortared, and there are bullets flying everywhere. And so our unit became very highly decorated for that day. You see all of our equipment kind of still med chests right outside the walls there. We're just rummaging through everything, trying to find exactly what we needed to
still unpacking.
Right?
Yeah, you just got there. Yeah.
Right. So
what it sounds like from what you're saying is that you guys weren't there yet, and they're like, well, we're taking people there, so you should probably be there when we get there.
Right.
Exactly. Because the MEF had been briefed that a surgical element would be at Tallil. And so that's where the helicopter took them. And then when we heard that's where they were going, we're like, well, we're going to fucking be there when they get there. We're going to take care of our Marines. So we did that. And we realized the third ID was going to get bogged down there, taking care of all these POWs that they had. And we're like, that is not what we want. We want to keep moving. We want to be at the tip of the spear.
Right.
And so, sorry, third ID. We start wheeling and dealing to get linked up with the 101st, who got to country late. But they were coming in, and so we decided we're going to go meet them. And the sergeant major is really pissed off. He does not want us to leave. Like, they're pissed that they have to stay there. They don't they don't want anyone else to escape. But he gave us directions on how to get out of Tallil Air Base to get to this convoy support center where the third ID was, 101st was going to be. And so we start driving, and all of a sudden we end up in this little town, and it's almost like a little circle drive, and people start coming out of their homes with AKs and start shooting off rounds. And we're like, oh, fuck, this is not a good place. we don't think we're supposed to be here. And again, we are 6 soft side Humvees. We have no comms. We don't have NVGs. We don't have crew serve weapons. We've got nothing. We are a FST, which is a little orphan unit that's supposed to be embedded inside a big boy unit. And so we were going out on our own trying to link up with 101st, which left us very blind and naked. And we see this very dangerous looking situation. And we're like, holy shit, just get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out. Let's turn around.
Right.
So as we turn around and end up taking a different road, we see a whole bunch of US vehicles, some LMTVs and some Humvees. And I look at the writing on the side and it's 507th Maintenance. And then we see a lot of blood all over these vehicles and there are no soldiers there. And that was really the first gut punch of the war was, oh fuck, like we did not see this coming. Cause you're right. Like we come in thinking we're gonna kick ass and take names. Like nobody bests us. You know, like,
Yeah.
but here's this entire unit that's missing.
Right.
Oh shit.
And there's just blood all over their vehicles. So we beat feet and turn around and head back to where the 3rd Infantry is. And we're like, oh shit. We think you gave us wrong directions. And the 507th ended up there too, because they were in a convoy with the 3rd Infantry. They fell behind a little bit and they missed a turn at a Y. And they ended up going right into Nasiriyah.
Shit.
And they're a maintenance unit. Again, it's the infantry moves forward mainly with their trigger pullers. You know, they wanted to leave their support elements in the rear because they want to just roll. They just want to roll through. Let's bring our medical. But 507th Maintenance was not too far behind, and they paid the price for getting behind.
Right.
So we head back to Talil. We report that there's a unit missing. 507th Maintenance is missing. And they called it in to Special Ops. And then we get directions to meet up with 101st. And somehow we got an FM AM radio and we could listen to the BBC. And
oh, wow.
It was a week or so later, listening to the BBC, that we heard that Jessica Lynch had been rescued. And that was a really good feeling to know that she'd been pulled out of there.
Well, it's also
it must have been
glad that it happened back then, because now I'm not sure they would have rescued. The current state of our nation's military, it's nothing against the boots on the ground. It's a knock against the assholes in leadership.
I'll tell you, I cried for 3 days watching the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Yeah,
I sat and cried, and I thought, I'm crying for every soldier that we lost, for everybody who went over there thinking that we had a real mission. We were doing good things for these people who went there and gave everything, left it all in the field. And we spit on them. We spit on them by just pulling out and being like, fuck it, we didn't care. You know, like old Hamburger Hill, you know, take it, then leave, let the enemy take it, then go back up. Like we thought we didn't do that anymore.
Right.
Yeah, all of our hard work and dedication is for nothing, and we're just going to leave all of this.
And that we left our whole military apparatus on that runway. That was pretty embarrassing. Pretty fucking embarrassing.
There are certain things that when I talk about it, I just have to. I tell people, don't get me started, because I will get mad.
Yep.
The Benghazi attack is one of them. Afghanistan is one of them. Like I legitimately, my wife saw me weeping when we watched 13 hours. You know, it just, Anyway.
It angers you so much,
it
because
does.
These people gave everything for their country, and you're just going to slap them in the face.
They
with
broke
this.
the faith.
Yes.
Right. And
They broke the faith.
I think one of the things with PTSD is that they've shown that I think a lot of times, if you feel very supported in the trauma that you're going through, you're less likely to have as much detriment kind of in your soul at the end of the day.
Right.
But if you're left hanging, if you're betrayed by the one organization that you thought had your back, that you were
Mhm.
willing to do anything, give anything, leave your family, miss Christmases, miss whatever's, work, leave when your kids are still asleep, get home after
Right.
they're in bed, not see them for a week. Like, if this is an organization that you believe in and that supports you and does the right thing, that's an organization you can feel good about. But to watch us just make ourselves laughing stocks and look weak on the world stage was a real kick in the teeth.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
So you had just heard about Jessica Lynch. She got
Mhm.
rescued. You're like, oh,
Mhm.
thank God.
Yeah.
You guys were able to get to the missing unit and link up with 101st and then press back on.
Yes, we did. So we got to the 101st and we just pushed forward. We jumped all over the place. I mean, I say if AFIS, they try to bring some comforts to soldiers downrange, but we said if AFIS was anywhere in the theater operation, we were moving. Because we were the infantry and like, you don't deserve anything good.
Right.
You've got MREs, you're good.
Yeah.
Keep moving.
Yeah.
So we just moved. Every time the infantry jumped, we jumped with them. We wore J-list for 6 weeks, our chemical gear.
Yeah.
And again, the war machine moved so fast. We didn't have any excess water for 8 weeks. So there was a prohibition on the use of water for anything other than drinking or brushing your teeth. So we're all pretty nasty. I mean, my hair, I could pick it up and it would move as a block with all the grease and sand and dirt and everything that was in it. It's pretty disgusting.
Yeah, but your camis could stand on their own.
Yep. Yes,
Yeah.
they could. Because like I said, we wore our J-list for 6 weeks. So those are, 6 weeks. So the pull-up pants with the suspenders and
Yep.
the picture you see that I'm taking care of the little child.
Yes.
I've got the J-list on.
Let me put that one up.
And interestingly, we had gotten to, I think, Anajef or Al Halal or something like that. We had got a little further north. And I thought somebody came in with a water buffalo. And I'm like, I am using some of that freaking water. Take a shower. And so we pulled 2 Humvees next to each other and I got out some 550 cord. Yes, that's the J-list.
Yep, right there.
Pants and that was sad. And this reminds me of a sad little situation, which is that the entire medical apparatus in Iraq had collapsed. And so we would, under the Geneva Conventions, take care of anybody that we injured or found injured, but there was nowhere to transfer them. They didn't have any hospitals. So we knew that we were transferring them to death. And that was really, very hard situation.
Right.
I bet.
It's helplessness, right?
It is. Yeah.
It's utter helplessness. One of the things that I will say, and I think this is, you can take this same principle and apply it across the board to anybody in service when it comes to helplessness, right? So there's a Greek myth of Cassandra, and she was blessed with the gift of fortune telling. She could see the future. She knew she could see the future, and she was cursed by the gods. They said, you can see the future, but nobody's ever going to believe a word that comes out of your mouth. Right. And so as police officers, we see people who are going to be victims. We know they're going to be victimized.
Right.
And we see people that are suspects. We know they're going to do bad guy shit. We know they're going to victimize people. And we can't do anything about either one.
No.
We have to wait until it happens. Right.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes where you guys, when you're deployed, when you're serving and you see something and you're like, there's literally nothing I can do to save this person. There's nothing I can do. I'm only one. I'm not Superman.
Right. And that's where a lot of kind of kind euthanasia came in.
Right.
Heavily medicating children that we knew had no pathway,
no ability
to survival.
To survive.
Yeah.
And that's
so sad. It's heartbreaking.
It really is.
God, it's rough.
Yeah.
War is horrible. It's bad.
Well, we'd love to have you come back. I mean, we're running short on time. I can't believe how fast this went.
I
We
know.
get you back for a part 2.
Absolutely. I would love to.
We'd
Amazing.
love to have you back for part 2. Just because I feel like we just only scratched the surface, and we haven't even talked about your second deployment.
Right. Is
So,
yeah,
yeah, our producer will get you scheduled, but you do have a dedication for this episode. Is that correct?
I do. Lieutenant Paul Derensberg. He was the lieutenant with me in Hawaii. So Hawaii was my first duty station. And in the Army, there's, you normally do PT in the morning, workout, first formation, all that. But in medicine, we don't really do that. We have long shifts and we work weird hours and whatnot.
Mhm.
But for whatever reason, I had a head nurse at Tripler who decided that we were all going to do PT. And this lieutenant, Paul Derensberg, worked with me on pediatric hem-oncology. So we're taking care of children with cancer, and that's rarely a good day.
Right.
But in Hawaii, it's created by a lot of volcanoes. So the Aliamanu Military Reservation, AMR, was the housing base for the 25th ID. And so they'd be all down in the center of the base, and our head nurse wanted us to run the ring. And Paul Derensberg was a big weightlifter. He's a big muscular guy from Louisiana. He was absolutely my mentor as a new nurse coming into the unit. And he always volunteered to run with me because as a lifter, lifters aren't usually runners.
Right.
And I wasn't slow, but he's like, oh, I'll run back there with her. And so he just was very, very good to me. We were just really good friends. And he had a cousin come in from Louisiana, and they went canoeing out to Chinaman's Hat, and the dinghy got loose, and he said he'd go after it. And he did. And his cousin watched him get caught up in a rip current.
Ugh.
And the Navy found his body 3 days later. And that was the first military funeral I'd ever been to. And that was my introduction to roll call, which if you've never been, that was the most painful funeral I'd ever attended in my life, because we're all in dress blues. And I'd never been to a military funeral before. And again, his name is Paul Derensberg. And so at the end, like, some first sergeant stands up and he starts calling out people from my unit.
Yep.
And they're all standing up and they're like, here, first sergeant, here, first sergeant. And then he said, Lieutenant Derensberg. And I thought, what? What is happening here? Lieutenant Paul Derensberg. And I'm like, and then he says his middle name. And I'm at this point, I'm ugly crying. I'm just like falling apart.
Right.
And then they said, like, he will not be with us anymore. And they started playing taps. And I thought, oh my God, that was the meanest thing you could have done to us. How could you be so cruel?
Yeah,
and sadly, I went to a whole lot more military funerals over time. But he was the first soldier friend who I'd lost. Fortunately, I didn't lose any near friends in combat. I lost a lot of U.S. soldiers, and I'll remember every one of their names. I want to believe that with their mothers, I can look a mother in the face and say, your son did not die alone. Anyone who came into us who's still had eyes open, but we knew they were mortal injury. I'd sit with them and hold their hand and pray with them. And
all you can do.
And I thought nobody who came into us conscious in any way, no soldier. And those pictures you see of me taking care of patients, those are not soldiers. I never would have taken a picture of a U.S. soldier wounded.
Sure. Right.
But that was very difficult.
The first police funeral I ever attended, because they'll do the same. They'll do a roll call. And typically in some places they'll do it live with an actual police dispatcher calling call signs on. And in other places, they will actually pipe in the actual dispatcher who's working, and they will have it done over the radio for the entire city to hear via broadcast. Yeah. And then they will call the end of watch, and they will give that person's, eulogy. And it's tough. I mean, I was the son of a cop. Like cop funerals, back Amazing Grace on the bagpipes will always make me cry.
It's a sobering experience. It's
It is.
so sobering when you hear it, or when you're there, when you see or you hear an officer go down, and there's nothing that you can do, and you're just sitting there. Everyone stops. It's like the whole world stops, and everyone's just listening, and they're just. It's so sobering, and it's humbling, and it's one of the worst feelings you could feel, and it equates really closely to those funerals when you're hearing that roll call get played,
Yep.
and man, it's so rough. But I gotta say, thank you so much, Casey, for being that beacon for those that are going to die, and you are there with them, ushering them through what's coming next.
Thank
And
you for having me.
yeah, you're welcome. And it's amazing that they were not going to die alone, and that they were going to die with someone who was there with them, who was ushering them through it and helping them. That's amazing.
And another thing I would do is always look in their DCU or their DCU cargo pockets or whatnot to try and find a picture, because I know Casualty Affairs does not come to a home in the middle of the night, and we had such a time difference. I knew the family would not be notified for 5 or 6 hours, and so I would just pray for the faces, the people in those pictures, and say, Lord, they're about to get a knock on the door that's going to change their life, and I hope that you can wrap them in your wings of comfort and strength, and shore them up for this knock on the door.
Well, rest easy, Lieutenant. We've got it from here. And I'll say this: I had a very, very frank conversation with my chief, and I will say it here on the show. I've said it many, many times. He told me he had a conversation with somebody when they were talking about faith and the job. And the guy said, how can you see the things you see and still believe in God? And he said, how can I see the things I see and not?
Exactly.
There you go. That's my thought.
So, well, Casey, thank you for coming on the show. Chuck, what do you have for us? Let's get Dylan to book Casey back real soon. We've also got a friend of mine. She's great. She was a Air Force flight surgeon. I can't wait to have her. Some of these amazing stories. I love this kind of stuff, because it's stuff that again, I got to do the cop running around chasing bad guys, pointing guns at people, all that kind of stuff. But some of the medical stuff just boggles my mind, because I'll put holes in people. You guys can plug them up. That's not my spiritual gifts.
Interestingly, really quick, my last job, and if I come back, I can tell you about this, was as a cadre instructor at Ryder Trauma Center down in Miami, where people are getting shot all day long.
Sure.
But my
as
sons,
they do in Miami,
as they do, which is why we train there. But my son's best friend's dad was a police officer up in Coral Springs, and he said, "Oh, you're medical. There are a number of us police officers who are really wanting to shore up our med bags, because medical can't come in until we've cleared it."
Right.
And there are times that we see people, we want to be able to do something for them before medical gets there, but we can't clear it yet. And so I sat down with him and I went through a lot of stuff, and I built med kits for them. And 2 weeks later, the Parkland High School shooting happened. Wow. And he was one of the first responders, and the police officers there saved every single kid who was salvageable.
Well, if you have a chance,
every single one.
If you have a chance, we'd love to talk to him.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Great. But
Chuck, what do you got for us?
I want to say thank you all for today for tuning in, and thank you, Casey, so much for coming on. We are going to have you back on for part 2. And I have to say this: you said at the beginning that you were not brave enough to be a soldier, but I guarantee you're brave enough, sure shit, now. And without your bravery, people probably would have died. More people would have died. And your compassion and dedication to what you do is amazing. And I just want to say thank you all today for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us on Instagram at war_stories_official, and our Facebook at War Stories Podcast. If you already following, we'd really appreciate it if you could share our posts and help spread the word. You can also check the link out in our bio on both platforms to find all of our social media. the links, and our website. Our podcast is available on all major streaming platforms, including YouTube. If you'd like to support us, head over to our website at www.warstoriesofficial.com. Again, that is www.warstoriesofficial.com.
We're redoing it.
We're redoing it. To grab some merch, we still have some Woody hoodies, shirts, patches, and stickers in stock. Stay tuned for what's coming next. If you feel you have a story or you know someone who does, we're always looking for law enforcement, corrections, dispatchers, firefighters, medics, and veterans to feature on the show, as well as ER nurses and doctors. If you're interested, please email us at booking.warstories@gmail.com. Again, that is booking.warstories@gmail.com to share your story. We'd love to have you on. Dylan and I can get you booked, so please email there. We'd love to have you on. If you know someone who would be a great fit for us, please send them our way. Thanks again for all the support. Stay safe out there.
And
Thank
Casey, this is normally where I give my little closing sign off, but I wanted to tag on to what Chuck said, and I will say this: I don't give a shit what anybody says. There's a bravery that I don't possess, where you can hold somebody's hand while they leave this earth. I have told many people, many trainees, many friends at this age, and I've said the world needs people that can hold the dog's hand while it's suffering, and the world needs people that can push the needle to put the dog out of its suffering. And those are not often the same people. Very frequently they are not the same people, and the world needs both. And so you possess a bravery that I don't, and that's that intestinal fortitude to sit with someone as they leave this earthly plane of existence. And so I commend you, and my hat's off to anybody that can do the medical stuff, because I had to do the kid stuff. That was where I draw no, right? Like, so
Tough.
yeah. So anyway, well,
Thank you again so much for having me.
Of course, we loved it. It was a
Thank
good
you.
time. And is there anything you want to say in closing?
We did care for some military canines as well, because they are soldiers, and
They are.
they get all the same care and rights, and they would warm our hearts in a different way. And I loved working with our military working dogs and giving them the respect that they deserved.
I was horrified to find out that there are police departments out there that the laws on the books are that their police canines are a tool and not treated like a member of the department, and therefore assaulting or murdering a dog is not the same criminal offense as assaulting or murdering a police officer. I was horrified. And I'm not a pet parent person, right? They're my dogs. I own them, right? Like,
Right.
I'm not all hippy dippy, like, oh, I have to adopt them and I have to ask for their consent to brush them. And no, bullshit. My dog. But at the same time, has some fucking respect for service.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right. Well, Casey, again, thank you. And we'll get you back soon. And until our next episode, come home with your shield or on it.
Okay. Have a good night.